Uh, Thank you, Yoel, and thank you, Galia, for organizing and inviting me to speak. The reason I'm going to speak to the microphone is only because Galia asked me for technical reasons, and I'll do it. And I want to dispel any illusion that if I reach the microphone, this is in order to make a serious statement on the relations. I want to take them, my talk slightly away from Professor Uzer, but I obviously deal with some of the aspects you raised. The United States had, for many years, three major anchors for conducting its foreign policy in the Eastern Mediterranean. The three of them were Egypt, under Mubarak, of course, Israel, regardless of the government we had at the time, and Turkey, certainly before the AKP took power in 2002, but even afterwards, and I'll deal with it in a minute. In all three anchors or pillars, I see a serious erosion from the point of view of the United States as pillars or as anchors for conducting its foreign policy in this region. Israel, there's no secret, ever since the 90s of the previous century, the United States has no major political achievements which are connected with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and, of course, Israel itself as a major party to this conflict. And it's unlikely that under the new configuration in the Middle East, which is shaping up in front of our eyes in these very hours, days, and months, the United States could foresee a major achievement for its policy in the region. And this is regardless of the ideology of this government or another government in Israel. Given the uncertainties and given the clouds which are hovering around, above this region, political and others, it is very difficult to see how an Israeli government can reach a far-reaching conclusion and decision about final borders, population changes, etc., and allow the United States to claim a major political achievement or victory. And so, from this point of view, I think that the United States and Israel can manage their relations. Obviously, they need to do this, but I think that the problems are going or are beyond the personal relations between this leader or another leader. Passing very quickly to Turkey and the United States, and this is the way I see it, and I'm not trying to say that this is the only way to view the relations. In spite of the very many hours that Obama and Erdogan are spending on the phone, I think that there are major differences of opinion, and I think that these differences will be exacerbated as we go down the road of the developments in the Middle East as I see them. Recently, the fact that the two are coordinating to some extent their position is because of the disillusionment in Turkey of this theory, the famous zero problems with neighbors, that Turkey is going through nowadays, and many of the speakers in this conference and elsewhere have expanded on, and I don't need to go over this disillusionment. And so there's a need between the United States and Turkey to speak about, for example, the whole issue of Syria, and not only in Syria. But down the road, there are problems, as I said, and I can deal with, I can speak about very shortly about a couple of them. One is related to what I see as the death of the Sykes-Picot 1915-1916 agreement. And there is no time enough to speak here about this, but I think that the major outcome of the developments in the Arab, or resulting from the Arab awakening, is the de facto, at least the de facto, I don't think that the euro, but the de facto collapse of the Sykes-Picot arrangements. Now, looked at it from Turkey's point of view, it's the whole Kurdish issue. What happens to the cooperation between the Turks in the Kurds in northern Syria with the Kurds of northern Iraq? And this is going to be, in my view, a major problem for Turkey and indirectly a problem for the United States as a result of possible Turkish reactions and actions to what may develop in this respect. The other issue which this institute dealt with elsewhere in other fora, conferences, papers that we wrote is the whole natural gas issue. The region ranging from Egypt in the south through the Palestinian, Israeli, Lebanese, and maybe even Syria stands to gain a lot from the discovery of natural gas. And Turkey has a different position on all of the legal issues and the technical issues which relate to Cyprus, of course, and the conveyance of the natural gas if all the producers, or some of them, decide to go to Europe with their natural gas. And there could be a serious problem there. Not necessarily between Israel and Turkey, because their maritime borders do not touch each other. But cooperation between Israel and Cyprus, cooperation between Lebanon and Cyprus, all of these could create and inflame the situation in the Eastern Mediterranean. And there is a small company, American company, involved in this. And so through this, there is an American angle. Now, let me just add that to the triangle, the United States, Turkey, and Israel, the fact that, notwithstanding what you said, Professor Yoel, there are efforts, formal efforts between the two governments to mend their relations. In my view, some of these efforts are conducted because the United States wanted the two countries, Israel and the United States and Turkey, to try and mend their relations. I think that there I almost agree with your conclusion that it will be difficult to reach this understanding. And the recent events in Gaza are just a good example for that, because the Turkish Prime Minister made a very strong, harsh statement about the Israeli reaction to the shelling of Israeli citizens in the south. And no rapprochement between the two governments or no formula would have prevented him from doing it. And I think that there are other reasons why, and I recommend this reaching an agreed formula. I just don't believe that this would have changed dramatically the relations between Turkey and Israel. You rightly put your finger on the Palestinian issue. I'm not so sure that in Syria we don't have conflicting interests. Could be. I think that there will be a temptation in Israel to play with this Kurdish issue, going back to previous attempts by Israel and the temptation to have some sort of a foothold in the new emerging Middle East. Let me move to Egypt. I think that it's now clear that the new government in Egypt is going to be, in terms of its relations with Israel, a different Egypt. And as in the past, the United States was a bridge. I'm not so sure that under the current Egyptian government, the United States could play this role as a bridge, but we don't have any other, I mean, meaning Israel, we don't have any other vehicle in the attempt to reach some sort of an understanding or modus vivendi and modus operandi with the new government in Egypt. I'm not so sure to what extent the U.S. government could play this role, not because it doesn't want to, but because of the ideology and the political approach of the new Egypt to regional issues. Between Egypt and Turkey, there could also be tensions. Let me remind you that basically Turkey lost Hamas to Egypt. The first visit that the Hamas leadership took after the victory, political victory in Gaza, was to Turkey. Today, the Hamas and the new government in Egypt find a more common language than with Turkey, than Hamas with Turkey, for natural and obvious reasons. It's not that they are totally coordinated, and I'm not so sure that Egypt likes the new developments in the recent 24 hours. But obviously there is more dependence of Hamas Gaza on Egypt than on Turkey. Now, strangely, Turkey could lose Syria to Egypt as well. In the post-Assad regime, there will be a role for the Muslim Brothers, one way or another. And these Muslim brothers will listen at least as attentively to Egypt as they will to Turkey. Luckily, quote unquote, for Turkey, there is the dependency on water in Syria, regardless of who is in power in Damascus, and that in itself will be a leverage or a factor that no government in Syria could disregard. But there is obviously a potential for tensions there if Turkey continues to harbor this sentiments that it is a major regional power, and it is, nobody can deny that, but if it continues to develop the same ambitions that it had before all these Arab uprisings. And I suspect, and this is where I will conclude so you don't have to raise the 2 minutes.
It's ready.
I suspect that the erosion in terms of the three pillars supporting the U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East is among the reasons why the United States is gradually withdrawing from the region. There is no, as I said, no major gains to be made, regardless of the direction of the Arab uprising. And the major reason which pushed the United States in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and even more recently, that is to say, the energy as a factor is gone. A couple of days ago, the International Energy Agency came out with a report, a prognosis, then in less than 10 years, the United States will surpass Saudi Arabia as the major producer of energy. The United States will not be dependent anymore on external resources of energy, so no major successes politically, no need for oil, and the erosion among the three traditional partners, Turkey, Israel, and Egypt. What is there for the United States to look for in this region? Thank you.